Welcome to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z. Today we will be going through our Police Scenario Response Prep training series focused on preparing you for the road as a law enforcement officer or deputy. This series will include recommended response guidelines for over 50 different scenarios you will encounter and provide insight as to what to expect and how to respond to given scenarios. So make sure to check out my other scenario response videos. Quick disclaimer before we start: make sure to follow your agency policies and procedures when responding to incidents. Alright, so this topic is going to be on criminal mischief, sometimes referred to as vandalism or graffiti, as those are the more common types of crimes associated with criminal mischief. Brief structure real quick. We're going to get some information from our Police Academy books. We're going to go through some guidelines, some of my personal experience, and then at the end we're going to show you how to write a report after responding to this incident. So let's go ahead and jump into criminal mischief. Criminal mischief is the willful and malicious destruction of property belonging to another person. As outlined in Chapter 806 of the Florida Statute, it can include injury or damage to property, such as graffiti or other acts of vandalism. For criminal mischief, document that 1. The suspect injured or damaged real or personal property, 2. The property belonged to the complainant, and 3. The injury or damage was willful and malicious. Make sure to photograph the damage for your report. Conduct a neighborhood canvass to gather information about the suspects. Based on your agency policies and whether there is a suspect, conduct a follow-up investigation. Provide the victim with the appropriate victim brochures and document this in your report. The Florida statutes enhance the penalties for criminal mischief based upon several factors, including the value of the property. Criminal mischief is a second-degree misdemeanor if the property damage is less than $200. It is a first-degree misdemeanor if the damage is greater than $200 but less than $1,000. The crime is a third-degree felony if the value of the property damage totals $1,000 or more. If the suspect has one or more prior convictions for criminal mischief, a subsequent offense is a felony regardless of the amount of damage. Any person who willfully and maliciously damages any place of worship or religious article is guilty of a third-degree felony if the damage is over $200. So that's criminal mischief. I do want to also include that criminal mischief is a misdemeanor exception. And what that means, it does not need to happen in your presence in order to make an arrest. So, for example, you arrive on the scene and the victim says, that person over there that I'm pointing at is the one who broke the windows out of my vehicle earlier today. Didn't happen in your presence, but it is a misdemeanor exception, so you can arrest for it. Now, before we get into deep to criminal mischief, there are a couple things. The first thing is ownership. So, for criminal mischief to be a crime, it has to be someone else breaking your stuff. So, for example, if you go to a lot of you're probably going to go to a lot of criminal mischief calls where they are domestic in nature. It's not domestic violence, it's not battery, right? But it is domestic in nature, where it's a husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend. They both live, let's just say husband and wife, for example. They get into a verbal argument. It's not physical, it's only verbal. And the guy decides to punch a hole in the TV, kick a hole in the wall, break a bunch of glasses on the floor. He owns all of those items, most likely, right? If it's his house, whatever, they're married. He owns those items. He is allowed to break them. You can't arrest him for criminal mischief. It's like you just breaking your phone because you lost a video game. No one's going to arrest you for that. It is your property. So you can't arrest someone for breaking their own property. That's not criminal mischief at that point. So keep that in mind. Now, it could get a little hairy if it's like boyfriend and girlfriend. It could get a little more complicated. You know, do they live together? Do they keep all their things separate? Do they share all their things? And then it could even get more complicated when it comes to, like, say, a vehicle, right? When it comes to a vehicle, determine, go on David, determine who is the registered owner. But even then, that could get a little hairy where maybe the boyfriend is a registered owner, but he basically gave the car to the girlfriend, she's the one who drives it all the time. It's kind of hers at that point. So if she does something to it, is that actually criminal mischief there? So keep that in mind when responding to that type of call. The next thing you need to determine if it was an accident. So, for example, let's just say you're backing out of your driveway and you bump into the neighbor's mailbox and knock it over, right? That's an accident. It wasn't on purpose. Remember, one of the elements, it has to be willful and malicious. So if it's an accident, it is not criminal mischief. If you show up and the neighbor's saying he did it on purpose, and the suspect's like, hey, look, I just backed up, I accidentally hit it, I'm willing to fix it, or this or that, then obviously that's not criminal mischief. You're not making an arrest. There could be other situations, like let's just say somebody bumps into somebody, knocks their phone, and it busts, right? That's an accident. That's not criminal mischief. Again, it has to be intentional, willful, and malicious. The next thing I do want to say, if it was intentional and malicious, but there's no damage, is it actually a crime at that point? Like, let's just say, for example, someone threw a raw egg at a vehicle and hits it, and the owner comes out and wipes it off and basically sees it's perfectly fine, but he's kind of annoyed, calls the police, and he's saying, oh, that's criminal mischief, he ruined my car, you go look at it, and he wiped it off, which means, eggs, yes, if you leave them on there, they can dry, they can damage paint, then yes, that's criminal mischief. But if he wiped it off real quick and it's clean, it's normal, and there's no damages, you don't really have criminal mischief. At most, you're probably going to have some sort of just information report to document what happened. I mean, could this be a stalking incident where this happened multiple times and maybe it's an X, right? That could be a whole different type of crime, different type of situation. So keep that in mind if there is even damage, right? A lot of people tend to freak out when they call and say, oh, he bumped my mailbox. You get there and there's not even a scratch on the mailbox, and maybe the video shows him like just pushing it a little bit, right? Just tapped it, but there's no damage, no nothing, right? Maybe even if that was intentional, if there's no damage, you can't put a dollar amount on it. Is criminal mischief there, right? That's something you're going to have to work out and figure out on the scene. But these are things to keep in mind. Now, I don't want to downplay criminal mischief. It's not your hot call. It's not your robbery, your burglary, your aggravated battery, right? But when responding to criminal mischief, you could have suspects that are very amped, right? So it could be rage-driven, right? They're busting out windows on a car. It's usually revenge. You get a lot of criminal mischief. It's like revenge, right? People spray painting the side of a church because they don't like that religion. People egging a car, people breaking windows out of a car. It's usually some sort of revenge. So if you do arrive on scene and the suspect's there, it could be a very, escalated type incident. So keep that in mind. I don't want to downplay it. Obviously, officer safety, obviously awareness. The next thing I want to bring up to is if this is a known subject. A lot of them with criminal mischief, it will be a known subject. They'll come right out and say, yep, it was my girlfriend. She was here an hour ago. I saw her pulled up, busted the windows out. I stayed in the house because I didn't want to get involved. Here's her information. Boom, it's a known subject, kind of like domestic. You drop that not in custody. You get the sworn statement saying, hey, I did indeed see them. It is indeed this person. You get your photos, your information, your evidence, and boom, you drop that not in custody. Or maybe they say, yeah, they live 10 houses down, go pick them up, right? You drive down there, you pick them up, take them to jail. So let's go ahead and go through how to write a report here. All right. So on this day, at approximately this time, I was dispatched to this location in reference to a criminal mischief. Usually I like to specify what it was, right? A criminal mischief graffiti, criminal mischief vandalism, window break, right? You can just be a little more specific because criminal mischief is kind of broad, right? It was a criminal mischief graffiti on the park storage shed and park walls. I arrived on scene and met with the reporting person, John Smith. John Smith stated he last saw the shed and the walls clear. They were located over here, right, wherever they were, when he left for work at approximately this time on this day. He did not see the walls and the shed again until he returned to work the next day at approximately this time. You always want to take that element from when you're doing like burglaries and stuff on when did you last see it and when did you now see it, to kind of establish a time frame and to establish that the victim did notice that the walls or the window wasn't broken and now it is, right? The reporting person stated that none of the park cameras pointed in the direction of the shed or the walls, and no witnesses were identified. Obviously, if that's not the case for you, you need to include all the witness information, everything they said, what the camera showed you, etc. John Smith stated he could give me an estimate at approximately $800 to clean up the graffiti on the walls in the shed. Now, obviously, a dollar amount is very important when it comes to criminal mischief. That is part of the element, right? That determines whether it's a second-degree misdemeanor, first-degree misdemeanor, third-degree felony. Those numbers are important. So an estimate, you're not going to get a conviction in court off an estimate. So you usually want to tell the victim, hey, I really need more than an estimate. If I send you this link in the next day or so or the next few hours, can you get an actual invoice from a company or business that will come clean it? For example, this one in particular said, hey, within a couple hours, I know a guy who does painting. I can get an estimate for you. Just send me the link and I'll send it over when I can. He, within, a few hours, he got an actual invoice, right, that said the business name, this, and that, or some sort of receipt that said it would cost $750. Include that in the report. He uploaded that as evidence. Boom, we have now a first-degree misdemeanor because it's between $200 and $1,000. So dollar amount is really important. Emphasize that to the victim, that you need to get a dollar amount. And it's possible that's something that a detective will follow up later, because maybe the victim can't get it fixed right away, or he's going out of town, etc. So include any receipt information, any photo information, the photos were taken, uploaded evidence, anything you noticed, and then BWC activated. So not a super complicated report here, usually not a very complicated type incident, but it could be very complicated if you go to an incident like I did, where it was a church, and it was a guy who had a mental disorder on top of being on drugs, had a weapon like a metal bat with like a pointed end, and he was on church property, and he probably broke 15-20 windows. He broke statues, he broke walls, anything he could hit with the bat he was breaking, and he was actively breaking when we arrived on scene. So obviously that's a very complicated type situation, and for the sake of the report, I had to say 10 windows totaling this amount, 3 statues totaling this amount, this shed he broke cost this amount to repair, whatever else, the lawnmower that was on the church property that he busted up cost this much. You could get a very long report just based off, all the things that were damaged. And then, of course, once you have all that, you need to then say total damage, approximate, $5,750. That would obviously make it a felony at that point, etc. And then, of course, the victim's going to have to follow up with actual documented proof on how much it cost them. So keep that in mind. That is criminal mischief. That concludes that. As always, follow your agency policies and procedures when responding to incidents. Deputies signing off. I'll catch you guys on the next videos.